was found guilty of murder and Sinead James guilty of allowing her death. They'll both be sentenced later this month. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and TuneIn. This is GB News. Now, though, it's time for headliners.
Hello and welcome to Headliners. I'm Simon Evans. Joining me tonight to go through Wednesday's newspapers, we have two comics who haven't left the studio since yesterday's show. Their little sleeping bags are still curled up like abandoned maggots in the corner. We have Steve M&N Allen and Leo Kerr. So, how are you both?
I'm good. I changed my jacket, put a different jacket on.
You do look as if you've slept reasonably well, really.
Yeah, I did. I slept loads.
You need an eye mask, that's all, isn't it? Yeah. Cut out the studio light. To be honest, it's so quiet and still down here in this nuclear bunker that we operate from. It's a lot more peaceful than my own bedroom. So, let's have a quick look at some of the stuff we're going to be talking about. Look at the front pages, first of all. The Telegraph have Trump under arrest. A fairly straightforward account there. The Guardian, Trump pleads not guilty to 34 charges in hush money case. A little bit more elaborate. We have the iPaper, Trump, The Reckoning. They are going for a quasi-biblical account of the whole thing. Express has George to star in Grandad's coronation, but the picture tells the story that the other three have gone with. The Sun has our new Queen. New honorifics apply to Camilla. That's being ironed out. That's the honorifics, not Camilla. And finally, the Daily Star, Orange Ma Baby makes history as he's the first Prez charged with a crime, bigly trouble. So, classic literate account there from the Daily Star. Those are the front pages. So let us kick off with the Times. Yeah.
Yes, they're leading with the story that's on pretty much all the front pages. So Trump has been arrested and charged. It's the first time a US president, a former US president, has been arrested and charged for crimes they committed whilst in office. Although it seems to happen a lot in other countries. I mean, in France, it just seems to be a rite of passage for any retiring president. They then go on and face criminal charges. And obviously in Brazil, in South America, Lula actually spent nearly 2 years in prison and has come back and become president again, which Trump could do. This seems to have just spurred his campaign on. The donations, financial donations are piling on. It's certainly given a lot of fuel to his grievance that he's being persecuted, because it looks like he is being persecuted. This is a very flimsy and very technical case that could all fall apart, and probably will fall apart because Trump's got very good lawyers. So it's a misdemeanor. It says he put hush money down as legal expenses, which is misrepresenting it, but then that misdemeanor then allowed federal offences around campaign finance to occur, but it's completely untested. I think they've made a huge mistake persecuting and prosecuting Trump like this.
And as far as we know, I've not seen this in black and white yet. Actually serving jail time would not necessarily preclude him from running if he was to get through it and out the other side.
He could be like one of those rappers who records an album over the phone. You know, he can become president from jail.
Well, the interesting thing would be if he does become president and is sent to jail, he could then commute his own sentence and get himself out. I mean, I'd love to see it. That'd make the history books. Yes. Not that I necessarily want Trump to be president, but I'd want it just for that particular story.
And it would stop him going to the stump and making a fool of himself, wouldn't it, in the run-up to the election as well. There was a point, I mean, I remember during 2015 even, let alone into 16, and he was building and building. I remember saying on various sort of platforms, what people didn't seem to understand was his followers loved the fact that he kept getting away with stuff. You know, everyone was going, how can you possibly think like, yes, it was like Arsenal were down to 9 men, but still holding on. You know, you didn't think, well, they deserved to be sent off.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm no legal expert. I certainly think no one's talked about this, but there's a legal case to say he should get that hush money back. Yeah. Because if one thing that's not happened is hush. But you know what? If you've committed a crime, you can be held accountable for it. Everyone seems to be having these side arguments, these distraction conversations about whether it is political, whether other people weren't held to account for the same thing. Surely the general rule is, if you're guilty of a thing, you can be found guilty of a thing.
That is true in America, but we talked about this last night to some extent, but, you know, there is such a history of American presidents having this kind of thing go on. Trump has been portrayed as somebody who is simply, you know, a philandering fool, you know, whereas Kennedy and Clinton, to name but two, were at least as bad on this particular front.
And it seems a weird thing to try and get him on when it's such a flimsy case. When there are other things, I mean, there are a lot of cases, criminal and civil, I believe, being held against Trump. And some of them are around election interference, which is a much more serious charge and a much more sort of clear-cut and with a lot of precedent thing to prove.
Yeah. Well, let's have a look at the Telegraph now, see what we've got there.
They go with this, well, they also have Trump under arrest because everyone has to have this picture, but then they also speak of the PM to protect biological women under change to the equality law by changing, when it says sex, they will say biological sex, clarifying.
I still can't look at the phrase biological women and think of it as just a normal way of describing women. I mean, it still sounds like a kind of washing powder or something.
Fairy non-bio sounds like a slur.
People only say biological for washing powder or warfare, and now it will be for women.
The third category.
Three category.
Like things that come in bunches, but you can't say the third one of those.
But so Stonewall is saying that this might not benefit women. This is probably not the point. If your argument is that this is not of benefit, it won't cost them anything, so you could do it. I think there's an argument to say if it clarifies a law, then why not? Because none of the newspapers seem to mention the fact that it also will be illegal to be discriminate against someone because they are transgender. So everyone will be being represented here. This is good, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the sine qua non of good legislation is it has to be unambiguous. You have to draft it in such a way that it cannot be misunderstood. And that's the first, you know, you can argue about what you're trying to say in Parliament and in committee stages and so on, but when you're actually coming to draft legislation, it has to be clear. And this is something that, of course, we've spent the last 2,000 years thinking was fairly clear. Yeah. And now suddenly it's all up for grabs.
I mean, it's interesting that, you know, we're not even going that far back when we look at the Equalities Act, but for them to muddle, you know, sex and gender just shows how much the landscape has changed. And now, you know, people do conflate sex with gender.
But there will now be, I think there have already been people, although I don't know whether they would have very high rank or status in this dispute, you know, at a governmental level, who are saying, so does biological mean XY chromosomes, or XX chromosomes, or does biological mean they've had significant enough surgery?
Oh man, we need the Bible to come back. You know, I never believed in God till now. Now I think Jesus, we need you more than ever. You know,
the snakes do it. Well, Jordan Peterson would say the snake is DNA, wouldn't he? I think he used to say that was the double helix. Anyway, anything else on that front page we need to talk about, Steve?
Well, we've covered the Trump thing and the biological redefinition. I mean, there's a story about golf breakaways getting upset. I'm not too moved by that.
Golf sale. What do you got on The Guardian, Leo?
So The Guardian has...
TikTok story.
Yeah, TikTok is being fined £12.7 million for child data law breaches. This is the Information Commissioner's office says that 1 million children aged under 13, so 13 is the cutoff point for using the app, were using the platform in 2020, despite, you know, being forbidden from using it. And there have been some big fines levied against social media in recent years. So Instagram was fined £348 million by Irish regulators.
Right, that's half their GDP, isn't it? What did they get it?
I don't know.
That's more than Apple have paid in tax in a decade. That's the whole point of Ireland.
I mean, did the Garda go down to like Mark Zuckerberg's house and, you know, shake him down, start taking the grandfather clock out?
They must insist.
Yeah. But this is, I mean, I think there's a lot of political pressure coming against TikTok. It's owned by a Chinese company, ByteDance, and it's one of the ways China just sort of exerts power in the West and really sows degeneracy amongst the West youth. So it pushes all this gender ideology, convinces children they need to transition and shows sexualised stuff.
I think just the platform itself, just the mechanism is an absolute mind virus.
And it's addictive.
The next app that gets invented will also be addictive. That's how these things work. The algorithm knows what you're interested in. That's why you see way more gender fluid content. There's a thing in the story.
This is why I only see Bach and the Sistine Chapel.
Interesting.
No, that's not true. That's not true. If you use TikTok in China, where it's not even called TikTok, it's called Douyin, and over there it shows, you know, algebra and family values and stuff. Because China actually wants to keep its civilization going, whereas in the West we're just intent on driving our civilization into the ground.
It does describe some of the content as, it says, sexually infused content, and that's what they've worked out about me. Loving it, seeing loads of that.
I bought some of that in TK Maxx for my pillow, but it didn't work.
All right. I get mine from Whittards.
Sexually infused. That sounds like you've done something something to the punch at the Christmas party.
Yeah, exactly.
Something
And I
you
love
do
watching the
over
videos.
bathtub after you've lit the candles. I think they should rename it Pickpock. I think that would be Pickpocket. That would be... Because that's what it does, isn't it? It sneaks in and it's thief of time.
Oh, yeah. I mean...
Well, and they're stealing data as well. So under Beijing's legislation, they can seize data from any Chinese company. So for all the TikTok say, oh, no, we're not passing data to China. Under Chinese law, they are.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that one will run and run. Finally, we have The Sun and news on Camilla.
Our new queen, and this is more about just the use of the title, because, as it says here, King Charles III and Queen Camilla, because we've dropped the consort. Now, as if anyone's going to read that and go, Queen, who's that then? We know, don't we? No one's going to be that confused. Some people say it's too soon, maybe it's not paying enough respect. I don't know, I find it will speed up. We know who you're talking about.
And I always understood, actually, that if you had a king, then his wife was the queen, whereas if you had a queen, then her husband was the queen consort.
Prince.
Prince consort, was it? Yeah, but just because, otherwise... At first glance, you might assume he was in charge. I think it was to kind of just emphasise.
So who was the Duke of Edinburgh?
That was the Duke of Edinburgh. Yeah, he was the Prince Consort. That was his title in terms of how he was to be seen next to the Queen. But he was also the Duke of Edinburgh. Yeah.
Right.
They've all got about 15 titles. Yeah.
Well,
What can we call her?
Fiddle.
Is she not the Earl of Spencer or something? I mean, what is she? If he was the Prince of Edinburgh,
he was the Prince of
Duke
Wales,
Edinburgh.
the Duchess of
Cornwall.
Cornwall.
Duchy of Cornwall, wasn't he? He had a number of them, yeah. But anyway, I mean, good luck to her. I think it will simplify things if they just say Queen. Well, that's the front pages. Thoroughly taken care of. They're not going to be getting up after that. Join us after a quick break for more deported doctors, Royal Mail prank that backfired, and much more besides. See you in a couple of minutes.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway...
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners with me, Simon Evans, Leo Lovely Curse and Steve Nice Allen. Those are their boxing names, it seems. Leo, kicking off with Wednesday's Telegraph, it seems like, after having hardly been mentioned because it's not relevant, someone actually does care about the ethnicity of the new SNP leader. Yeah, this story is hilarious. So Karen Adams, who's a SNP politician, has come out and said that questioning Humza Yousaf's competence is racist. Yeah. She says the terminology used by people criticising Humza Yousaf, such as useless, is it's used by racists. Used by racists all the time. It's a racist trope. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, if you could make this stuff up, you could probably get employed by the SNP as a speechwriter. And she says she feared the misogyny Nicola Sturgeon endured has now flipped to racism towards Hunter. I don't think there's misogyny towards Nicola Sturgeon. I'm not even sure Nicola Sturgeon was a woman or even a human. It was misandry, if anything, wasn't it? The suspicion was that she was not womanly enough. Yeah, and the criticism of Humza Yousaf is generally completely justified. He's just left his post as Health Secretary, and new figures have just been published showing that cancer waiting times in Scotland have fallen to their worst ever level, while delayed discharges and A&E figures were also desperate. And that's on top of 3.5 times the drug deaths of the rest of the UK, the lowest life expectancy. It's an absolute car crash. The SNPs, because they've just focused on independence, they've lost sight of any other metric that a government should be measured on. And I would also add, for me, the most important criticism of Yousaf is he has a nasty authoritarian streak, which is demonstrated beyond any kind of, I think, reasonable doubt with his hate crime legislation. I love this phrase, which, before I bring you in, Steve, she says, just to be clear, calling somebody lazy who clearly isn't is racism. I mean, just to be clear, I love how people feel they can close down the debate. See? That's a lazy assumption.
As much as I hate to just sit here and agree, because that's not what I'm here for, I'm meant to disagree. As a logic-y person, then you get to the point. Her point of view means it's impossible to call him useless, regardless of how useless he may be, without it being shut down as racism, which, he's a politician. They're all called useless all the time, because a lot of politicians are, and even the ones who aren't, you call them useless because they're politicians. So the idea of shutting it down as racism, obviously, is flawed, but then it also says she was writing about this in a newspaper column, and as someone who every so often churns out a newspaper column, I realise how desperate you are for content. You will write up anything to 400 words. So I think, like yesterday we talked about her getting upset about the malicious booking into a salon. Again, you have to fill the newspaper column.
I do think there has to come a point when you have the Prime Minister, the Mayor of London, and now the First Minister of Scotland, all men of, what would you call it, subcontinent heritage. People of colour. There has to be some acceptance that the country of Great Britain is not the worst example of racism that you could find on there. But never mind, it will never be enough for some people. Up north of the wall, staying now with the Wednesday's Times, and J.K. Rowling rapidly becoming the de facto moral compass of the nation.
Interesting. This story talks about her speaking of the story of the rapist who avoided jail. It's amazing that they lead with her name so much, because the story itself is so important that the fact that you've got a celebrity person condemning it, everyone should condemn it. The story is you've got this young man who was found guilty of rape who avoided jail because of his age at the time.
And rape of a young girl.
But it's the policy is that if you're under 25, that when sentencing you should consider not jail, because there's a chance that younger people could be rehabilitated more. But come on, this is guilty of rape. Read the room. You're sending out a message to everyone else in the country. So it makes no sense. When you read the full article, it says that you should be considering these in case-by-case cases. And that's where these things go wrong, that you get this rule that they think they have to apply in general. There is nothing stopping the judge to say, oh, you're going to jail for this. So
I think this kind of rule is probably there for, I would guess, reckless driving that's led to an accident or something, and you go, well, it's not going to make him any better, but sending him to jail. But this is completely inappropriate.
Yeah, no, and it seems, in Scotland at the same time, somebody is sent to prison for 14 months for racist graffiti. So it shows that there's a two-tier justice system, ideologically driven, where, spray painting imagery on a wall is seen as worse than raping a child, which is absolute madness. And it's another example of the SNP failing Scotland. So they've brought through this focus on rehabilitation, which sounds all nice and woke and cuddly, until you realise you're talking about criminals here, Like, some criminals deserve to go to jail.
And I do think we've seen some examples. We've covered a lot of these stories where the College of Policing has issued guidelines that young fairly sort of green police officers have perhaps misinterpreted a bit too enthusiastically or whatever, and it's understandable that police in those situations get confused. I cannot find any explanation or exculpation for Thomas Ross, KC, who has spent 20 years working in the High Court. You know, this is not the chap. I've got it wrong. Got the name wrong. Anyway, the judge in this case, whose name is currently escaped. The judge, Lord Lake. Sorry, yeah. I mean, you're a judge. You don't get to that job without having to make some calls about what the legislation intends and make some sort of decisions about precedent.
And the judge actually says out loud in words, this is about your age. If you were older, you would be going to jail.
Yeah.
So clearly guesses that half of the story and just fails to apply it in this case.
Very, very strange. Well, hopefully J.K. Rowling's name and celebrity status will tilt the scales on that one. Staying with the Times, Leo, fewer targets would improve the NHS, maybe get rid of dartboards altogether, in fact. I don't know.
Yeah. So the NHS should slash the number of targets it sets to leave no more than 10 national priorities. I don't know how many they've got at the moment, but this is a government-ordered review, and they're saying, I mean, I've heard this said about the NHS, there's so much form-filling and so much box-ticking to make sure, so much of it is replicated across different forms to show that they're hitting all these, you know, they've done these particular things and referred people to particular pathways and stuff. So they're saying a few targets will concentrate the minds of GPs and other people in the NHS on you know, more important things to be more effective. And excessive focus on targets actually leads to gaming, where people, you know, do things to hit the targets, but they're not really doing the things that need to be done.
Like teaching to the test in school, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're kind of going, we just want you to get through exams. It doesn't matter if you walk out the door having learnt nothing of any value.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Like that, but with heart surgery.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It feels right to me instinctively. It's probably the single most complex organism in the country, if not the world, isn't it, the NHS?
Yeah. And this issue, it's a tricky one to balance, because you don't want no checks.
No.
Otherwise, how will we know if it's doing well or not? But, of course, there's a scale problem. The more paperwork you need, that is an amount of time you're taking someone away from doing something else. Plus, also, the paperwork must take the majors. Because do you remember when there was the virus attack on the NHS that locked all that data?
Yeah.
And the reason they managed to hack them is because they were still using Windows XP.
Yeah. Right.
Those machines must be taking half an hour to warm. So that's wasted time.
I've been in the GP recently, as you know, because I've had gout, everyone. I've had gout. And it is quite... I mean, I would give full credit to my GPs. They've been great. The surgery is sometimes a bit slow. Obviously, there's long queues waiting on the phone and all that, but that's not any one individual's fault. But you do get the sense even there that they are, you know, the administrative, you know, the kind of just waiting for a screen to load.
Yeah,
you know, it's crazy.
I think we need to introduce more competition to the NHS.
Well,
maybe not privatise it completely, but certainly if people could choose surgeries and then, you know, they can go to the good ones and then the good ones get more money and get more funding from the government.
There is, I mean, people have talked about tokens for education before now, where everyone gets $3 or $4 grand a year per child, and then you can choose which school to spend that in, and that some of them will cover it. You know, I think that's going to happen with health if they're not careful, because the worst case scenario is that all the well-off people, you know, flee. The private sector just expands, and the less well-off are just left with an absolute, you know.
Sounds like a good system.
Yeah,
it is. At the moment, I love the fact that you can leave a Google review for your GP. So,
iNews now, Stephen, in the latest line of hoaxes that seem to be making up more and more of the news lately.
This is about a WhatsApp that was sent to doctors who were striking, migrant doctors who were told that they would be dobbed in, that our border force would get rid of them, which clearly is a wind-up, because our border force couldn't manage to deport someone with a T-shirt that says, please deport me.
Yeah.
It was Lewisham and Greenwich NHS Trust. We don't know who was the person who sent this one, but they've been told off, because very much you can't say this. They point out, under the current immigration guidance, unpaid leave taken to participate in legally organised industrial action is exempt. You know, just to calm everyone down. But this clearly was just a bit of manipulation, trying to get people to not strike.
It does kind of feel to me, it was a bit like, because we've got another one we'll come up to in a second. There was one yesterday, as we've already mentioned, with the SNP woman who had misunderstood with it, what turned out to be just an administrative error, but she thought she was being trolled about...
the bikini wax.
Bikini wax. people are just very thin-skinned at the moment. And this next story, might as well tie the two together. This is in Wednesday's Express, and this was an April Fool's joke that went wrong.
Yes, this is the Royal Mail. They've been forced to apologise after this cruel April Fool's pay rise prank. So the Royal Mail staff and the Communication Workers Union and the bosses are all in negotiations at the moment for a pay rise. So some wag thought it'd be a good idea to put up a poster saying, you've been awarded an 11% pay rise. Yeah. Not only that, you're going to be able to use your own cars. We're going to hire 10,000 telegram boys. So everybody's like, oh, this is amazing. Because, I mean, April Fools aren't normally something that's actually likely to happen.
It's too plausible. Or 18% maybe.
And obviously people started crying about it. Nobody's got a sense of humour in these things. So a spokesman for the union said, for many Royal Mail employees, the workplace is now a completely toxic environment where nasty, tone-deaf jokes such as these are considered culturally acceptable. Oh my God, you wet wipe. Oh my God.
What would they have done if they'd actually put a saucepan full of water over the door waiting for them to come into the negotiations?
I'm glad dogs try and bite your hands, you know?
The joke that Royal Mail did, maybe it's a good joke, it just lacked delivery.
Very good. Well, that's this section in the bag. Coming up, we've got the secret language of racist football. Infertility increases and the secret of living to 100. I wonder if that's 3 stories or just the one. We'll see you in a couple of minutes. There you go.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
And welcome back to Headliners with me, Simon Evans, Leo Lovely Curse and Steve Nice Allen. Still, Leo, kicking off with Wednesday's Telegraph. It seems like after it hardly... Hey, Well, we've gone all the way back to the beginning of the prompt here. I don't know what's going on. Sorry, we'll have to carry on. Read the next story that we've got while they discover where the prompt should be.
Into the Telegraph.
Is it the Bible as a pledge of honour?
No, before that. One before. Back it up.
Before that. Is this
what about
the
football?
Hate Lab? Yes.
Yeah.
Hate Lab has got football fans in its sights. Doesn't sound remotely Orwellian.
It's the use of emojis and what they call non-direct language has managed to help racists stay away from the moderators.
Right.
And I can understand how using emojis does make things more confusing. I personally genuinely enjoy aubergine, which just means my use of emojis very confusing.
Yeah.
But what they've done there, by using this coded language, it's harder for the moderators to spot it. Well, you just think, have another search that searches for... They list images of monkeys, bananas and vomit. Well, then maybe just search for those. But then I suppose
but that just
Mpox came along.
That might just be warning that monkeys actually find bananas. They can be
an allergy.
An allergy. Yeah. They can be emetic.
Imagine what if you want to tell your friend that a monkey ate so many bananas that it threw up?
Yeah.
Then you're going to jail for hate crime.
I mean, I suppose there is a traditional use of the monkey as a racist slur in the context of football. But is this really the best use of an internet search, looking for... I mean, in terms of hate crimes, I don't know. Maybe it is.
But I'd say the reason we have this story is because this Hate Lab came up with a search pattern to identify it. Well, I think you've just solved the problem.
Yeah.
Now you'd know how to do the thing that stops people getting past the moderators. Have a word with the moderators. If it's just search, I mean, I believe at some point AI will solve this.
Yes,
because
by
it's
replacing
just about...
all those people who are racist with machines.
Who are doing far more efficient.
Robot racists.
They will. Well, they just won't breed at all. They won't be needed. They'll be given injections. But I don't know. There's always been a certain amount of banter allowable in football. I'm not saying that I approve exactly, but I don't like this chilling effect.
Let's just edge away from Simon here.
There exists an organisation called Hate Lab. Once you've established that, there's only one way it's going to go, isn't there? It's going to just be looking for it.
And it's this focus on ideas rather than material things.
Yeah.
So we do have hate that causes material harm. We've got suicide bombers blowing themselves up in pop concerts, trying to blow up maternity hospitals, things like that. Why aren't they looking at that communication and that ideology and how those people are radicalising themselves?
Even within this story, the number one footballer, the most hate that was directed at a single footballer in that campaign was Harry Kane by miles when he missed that penalty.
Right.
I don't know which emojis they sent him. Possibly,
pint of milk.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and they're saying, oh, it's terrible because those tweets are still up 4 months on. Well, maybe they are, but I doubt Harry Kane is revisiting them on a nightly basis.
We have just mixed up two issues. People are trying to track down suicide bombers, and that's a legal issue. I agree with not making these things legal issues, but if you have a bot that finds them...
You know that all the funding for this is being drawn away from anything that's doing actual, measurable... good in the world.
It is always these, hope not hate is another one, which no doubt started with the best of intentions, but very soon you get this mission creep. It's always the same. Before you know it, they're starting to poke their nose where it's not needed or wanted, and just creating more division.
Once you've killed the dragon, you still got this big sword, and you're going around looking for things to kill with the sword.
Leo, times now, it could be the end of... I'm back on track. It could be the end of the Bible as a pledge of honour, so help me God. For the second time.
So, Bible-swearing jurors can be biased. I think that's a typo. They mean based. Apparently, jurors who swear in the Bible are more likely to find a defendant guilty if they decline to do the same and take a non-religious oath, according to a study. So, 60%. The difference is 60% to 49%. So, 49% of the ones who made an oath on the Bible were found guilty, whereas 60% of those who didn't make an oath on the Bible were found guilty. This just shows that people who don't make an oath on the Bible are usually guilty. That's what it proves.
Well, you're joking, but it could as easily be that as it could be. They
have no morality.
They are presuming that it's the juries found them guilty in an otherwise completely arbitrary manner.
Yeah.
Just because they didn't swear on the Bible, where you're absolutely right. It's at least as plausible that people who don't swear on the Bible don't have as powerful a conscience restraining them from impulsivity.
Yes.
Steve?
I would say this news story is great for people like me as an atheist. It's pre-warned me. Swear on the Bible. I don't care. I'd swear. Give me all your different books. I'll swear on all of them if it gets me off.
It absolutely does seem to me that the first thing you should think about is what will get me off. Yeah. And if you're standing there in court already up for, cheating some old bird out of her savings, and you're thinking, well, I'm not going to swear on the Bible because that would make me a hypocrite, I would think.
It's a bit late for that. But Donald Trump will definitely be swearing on things. And there's a beautiful interview. I wish we could get the clip.
Tiny little handprint on the Bible.
There's a lovely clip where he's interviewed by two religious people and they're saying, what's your favourite part of the Bible? And he pauses and says, I'd have to say all of it.
I like both books. I like both books of the Bible. I would say best of the Beatles. He's fantastic. But yeah, seriously, I mean, anyone who doesn't understand, there is a serious point, semi-serious point. Anyone who doesn't understand the social norms at play, to the extent that you just put your hand on the Bible and use the standard oath in that situation, you're giving a little bit of a tell about yourself in that situation, aren't you?
I was surprised that less than 30% of those in the study chose to make the religious oath.
Yeah, that's true. I think it's a good counsel to thieves and robbers out there. They're on the Bible. You've got nothing to lose. It's what was it? Pascal's wager, isn't it? At its most basic level. Staying with the religious theme, Steve. It seems being been denounced by church has turned some gay and lesbian people off of the whole thing. It's
new unsurprising research says that lesbian, gay and bisexual people are far less likely to be religious and therefore more likely to be found guilty in a court of law. That's what we've just worked out. So the census is the Office of National Statistics been analysing this, and 2/3 of lesbian, gay and bisexual people in England and Wales have no religion. So who would have thought that LGB people would actually think, do you know what, this group that says I'm a sinner and will burn in hell, it's not for me.
And yet I will say, my parents live in Norfolk, rural Norfolk, last 40 years. Their next-door neighbours for quite some period of time were a gay couple who lived next door and they were both sort of middle-aged, they both heavily involved in the church and absolute pillars of the church-based community of the village. It does kind of depend where you are. You know, we have an image, I think, possibly in our minds of what a gay person is, like an urban, switched-on, fast-moving, do you want to mean like a kind of social media? But that,
on roller skates.
Exactly, I'm probably digging myself a huge hole here, but I think there is a much wider gay community, and many of them actually are heavily involved in the church.
And it'd be interesting to flip the statistics, because I'd have thought a lot of religious people are actually gay.
Yeah, that's true as well, of course. Well, Jesus, no, I'm not going to do that. Kevin may not have left the building yet. But I don't know what to make of this. I mean, it's like there's some very complicated statistics that they're trying to draw a single conclusion from, and I don't think you can. It is interesting that Buddhism seems to be more friendly towards gay people. They are 5.7% of Buddhists and 3% of Jews, compared to only 1% of Hindus and less than 1% of Sikhs or Muslims. So those are your religions if you're inclined that way.
And the base number is that 37.5% of the general population are atheists, which means I think we need a bit more respect. It should be illegal to mock me.
Yeah, it should be. Yeah, absolutely. You should be a protected characteristic, certainly. Agnostic, maybe not. I don't know. Baby news at last now in the Telegraph, Leo, and a chance for you to flex, as it seems that breeding is far from straightforward these days.
Yeah, so 1 in 6 people worldwide are infertile, according to the World Health Organization. And also the fertility treatment available is inadequate and expensive right across the globe, so it pushes a lot of hopeful parents into a poverty trap where they can't afford to have children. What's interesting is the fertility rate or infertility rate is similar across all the continents. It's slightly higher in the West. I guess that's because, you know, we're exposed to more pollutants.
Well, I would have a guess at this, because there's one factor they haven't mentioned in this, and I went through it closely to try and understand, and it is the age at which women start trying to have a family, of course, and that is a significant thing, and I don't mean this in any sort of preachy way, you know, ladies, quickly, you're running out of eggs, but that's the grim reality of it. It gets much harder after about 33, 34. That, I suspect, is what's going on in the West, that women are waiting longer. But I was surprised to see that it's so high in the developing world.
And also obesity, I think. So obesity affects your fertility, but it also, not just medically, it also affects how attractive you are to people. So people won't want to impregnate you or get impregnated.
I don't know that they would bracket that under fertility. It says 1 in 6 infertile is the headline, then you read on, it goes affected by infertility. So they've basically been trying for a year and they can't get pregnant. Then that is, well, I don't know. I would like to know how many of them it's that. How much of it might be to do with testosterone levels are plunging in the West? That's another thing. And you know, at the lower end.
I want to see their technique.
Yeah, that could be it as well. You know, the timing.
Could be the wrong orifice.
I did like that definition, defining infertility as a disease of male or female when you've tried to get pregnant for at least 12 months of regular, unprotected sex. So that's 4 times.
Yeah. I would say, I think it is probably valid, though, that this kind of stuff should be made available if possible. I know several women who have been through IVF treatments, and it is eye-wateringly expensive. And, you know, it can absolutely leave them pretty much destitute just as the baby comes along, you know, and that's a pretty horrific start as well. So
I got to interview Robert Winston years ago about this, and he made a really good point that stayed with me, that if you break your leg doesn't work, we fix it.
Yeah.
If you're trying to have kids and something doesn't work, why would we not fix it? So why isn't it in the same place?
Especially given that we are really genuinely worried about this now.
Yeah, we need children.
Yeah.
And also I think people are depressed because they're not having children. It's the most sort of enriching thing you can do.
And also the single best thing, if you do use IVF, you've got a couple of dozen of embryos to choose from. You can select the tall blue-eyed one. It's fantastic now. They should throw that in as well. Anyway, boffin news for you now, Steve. This is Wednesday's Independent. The genetic roots of longevity. Could we soon be rid of this blight on the young?
Yes, they've worked out what's the DNA cause behind people who live over 100. Scientists identify a cell-type composition and function change that is unique to those that live over 100. And I thought, wait a minute, everyone you see in a tabloid who made it to like 105, exactly, they all put it down. I have a drink every day, I smoke, I eat a fry-up. What's that? That somehow anecdotal evidence is in no way important? Wowzers. So, yeah, but the actual story is, in terms of living long, genetics helps. What?
It's your immune system, right? This is the thing, that some people's immune system keeps working longer than other people's doesn't.
So how do I get one of these genetic immune systems?
It's not really useful information that you can do anything with. The actual story is impressive about how they collect the data, but the conclusion is genetics make you live longer.
So you might as well smoke.
Yeah.
No, not necessarily. Whatever age you would have lived to.
I mean, you quite frequently see this, but I have just happened to have seen one today. The top 2 causes of death across the West, and have always been for a long time. Heart disease is number 1, like by a very long way, and number 2 is cancer, and then number 3 is like way down. It's like, I think it may be diabetes or metabolic disorder, whatever they call it. So those 2,
right,
heart disease and cancer, you would not be protected by an immune system as such, would you?
Well, the heart thing could be a complication. Well, the heart thing could certainly be the thing that kills you is your heart giving up, because of heart disease, but that's a complication of being ill from other things. Puts the stress in the heart. Yeah.
Final quick break now from us. Join us for our traditional subject matter in the final section. We have madness with woke pirates, men and women are different, and a smelly wife in relationship news. See you in a couple of minutes.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners. Straight to Wednesday's Guardian now, Leo, and it's spin the wheel time for this week's historical hive of diversity.
Yeah, so the Guardian is asking, were pirate ships actually beacons of diversity and democracy? So there's a new exhibition in Cornwall that shows that there are queer pirates, female pirates, pirates of colour, and they all got a vote, an equal share of the grog. This is, of course, according to a historian who reads the Guardian and thinks that these ideas must be propagated, even though he's probably making it all up. And also it reveals some stuff that really wasn't very woke at all. So apparently they engaged in the slave trade, and they threw black slaves overboard to drown, which I think, yeah, that's pretty far away from woke as far as I can tell.
It is interesting. They have to play this one very carefully. I can see they're obviously trying to stir up some interest in their new exhibition. Fair enough. And I have heard for many years that there were female pirates. There were pirates who concealed their identity, that were female but would conceal their identity as men, and there are also just obvious ones. There's one here, Mary Read, who there was a famous engraving of her, ripping her top off as she's about to kill a bloke in order to utterly humiliate him as he realises he's been beaten by a woman. I think this stuff has been known by anyone who was interested in pirates on a genuine historical level for a long time. But they have to be very careful, because on the one hand they kind of go, oh, it turns out pirate ships were full of diversity. However, they were also very evil. So, so is the diversity good?
This idea that people who stole were actually people of colour.
Yeah.
That's not the most sort of woke thing to say.
No, exactly. And we all know that piracy, like slavery, is still carried on to this day by people who are, have yet to have their William Wilberforce moment.
They're quite diverse.
What do you got on this, Steve?
Just that, it's got the word woke in it. It's one of those stories, isn't it? Everyone's got their own definition, so any sentence with it in becomes circular logic. But you're right, it is simply to make happen what we've just done. We've just talked about a pirate exhibition down in Cornwall, which wouldn't have happened without this press release.
I would go and see it. It sounds like it might be quite lively. iNews now see that the BBC are using dystopian young adult fiction tropes to interview presenters who want to keep their jobs. I'm up for this. Actually,
Well, they call it Hunger Games style interviews. There's no bow and arrows. I don't want to ruin it for you, but there's no fighting to the death. Full disclosure, I was a local radio presenter until 2020. The pandemic happened and they trimmed out a lot of us.
Yeah.
So I would have been going through this now. So I've got some sympathy where people have this minute-long interview to save your job, where they say you've got 60 seconds, tell us why you should keep your job. And I will say, if you're a radio presenter and you can't talk to time, you should be out of a job.
In all seriousness, it's not quite as horrific as they make it sound, does it? You are basically being asked to justify your job, which is your job to do that sort of thing, to be able to speak coherently, as you say. It's a balloon debate, isn't it, basically? Why should I not be chucked out of the balloon? We used to do these in sixth form.
Well, I think the issue is that this is happening to the BBC, and previously, a job at the BBC was a job for life. You're a government panjandrum. You're never going to be removed. You've got this steady money that's being stolen from old women, just being shoved into your back pocket. So
I missed that so much. That was good money.
Not used to it, though. You're right. Funny enough, though, the bloke who has actually come to and sort of coordinated it all is Nicky Horn, who I think is on something called Boom FM or something, which is a new station which is picking up lots of old Radio 2 DJs and so on.
Right.
I love Nicky Horn. Nicky, if you're watching, no offence, mate. He used to be on Capital Radio in the 70s. He did a show called Your Mother Wouldn't Like It, which was punk and so on. Anyway. So he's a good one. But anyway, Daily Star next, Leo, they are living up to their astrologically suggestive name for a change.
Yeah, so people that are born in April are more likely to be famous and successful. And this just seems, it seems, they sort of say, statistically they're more likely to be successful. I don't know why that is.
And even then, they're not, are they?
Education, upbringing, but they say apparently persistence is still the most. This is a non-story pretty much.
It's another example of mixing up correlation and causation.
Yes.
And also the months have different lengths. So if you're born in February, you're just less likely to be everything.
Oh yeah.
Sorry to ruin it for you.
Well, there are certain things, aren't there? It has been absolutely proven beyond a doubt that the earlier you're born in the school year, which in this country is September, in America it's January, the more likely you are to become a professional sports player.
Yeah, because you're going to be bigger.
You're going to be bigger, and that's a nice feedback loop. You get used to being a good player. I don't know about successful, though. I mean, I don't know what the different criteria.
There might be things about... There'll be a repeating pattern of when summer is, I suppose. So if you'll be one when it's spring if you're born in April, so maybe that moves you on to walk quicker. But, yeah, it's probably a bit more like guesswork, isn't it?
I think so. Brain news now. Steve in the Mail, I'd like you to overcome your innate male limitations and deliver a well-planned, well-judged and empathic response to this actionable slur.
Oh, no, I'm just going to get really angry, because this doctor, this brain specialist from California, has looked at the difference between men and female brains, and he just measured blood flow. So even that isn't spot on. And he says that women have healthier, busier brains, which means they go to jail 14 times less than men do. Causation, again, gets linked in there.
Yeah, I don't think that's the reason they don't go to jail.
It's the brain. You've got all the blood flow.
They're not Christian. No, it is because they are Christian. That's it.
But he then says that men live longer when they have a woman caring for them, because the wife will moan if you're texting when driving. You patronising little psychiatrist is the word. And then it says women have shorter lifespans because they get the chronic stress from men. Are you trying to get laid? Is the only reason to come out with it?
They don't have shorter lifespans. They have longer lifespans.
Yeah, they have longer lifespans.
Yeah. But, I mean, if he's saying if they're married, they live less long than single women.
This is I'll tell you what I've noticed anecdotally. Women who are widowed in their 50s, roughly, live very long and productive second half of their lives. I have noticed that. This is more interesting, though, that he says men are 40% more likely to develop schizophrenia, whereas women are far more likely to develop depression and neurotic-type disorders and stress disorders and so on. That's a proven and measurable distinction. I don't know whether it's to do with blood flow in the brain.
No, and our brains are different in terms of the two hemispheres are less connected in men, which means we end up with less ability to use words fancy, but we're good at space.
Well, talking of which, this gentleman has not been using words fancy. This is relationship news, Leo, and he's this bloke has put his foot in it by the sound of it.
So this guy says, I refuse to share my bed with my wife if she doesn't shower first. She says I'm overreacting. So this sparked a fierce debate with people saying he shouldn't force his wife to have a shower before she gets into bed. And I'm sort of agreeing with those people until I read down. His wife's a gynecologist, and she comes home spattered in fluid. So yeah, maybe.
I think he's being not just reasonable. I think he's being sort of faithful to her.
And hose her down in the garage.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to send around.
You should always wash the blood off your hands metaphorically. That's in the hero's journey, isn't it? You come back after battle and you cleanse yourself before entering. I've always said that was important. Well, the show is nearly over, so let's take another quick look at Wednesday's front pages. Telegraph, Trump under arrest. Guardian, Trump pleads not guilty to 34 charges in hush money case. The iPaper has Trump the Reckoning. The Express has George to star in Grandad's coronation, but an illustration of the Trump case. The Sun, our new Queen. And finally, the Daily Star has Bigly Trouble. Those were your front pages. That's all we have time for. Thank you to my guests, Leo Kearse and Steve N. Allen. Join us tomorrow night for Andrew in the squeaky chair, Josh Howie and Nick Big Dog Dixon. Remember, if you're watching the 5 a.m. repeat, stay tuned for The Breakfast Show. Otherwise, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I'll see you again very soon. Good night.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes & Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good evening and thank you, Michelle. Well, the events that are taking place as we speak on Manhattan Island, New York, are indeed historic. Never before in the history of the USA has a serving or former president ever been served with criminal charges. It nearly happened back in the 1970s with Richard Nixon. He was literally on the verge of receiving a criminal prosecution when he stood down, resigned as president, and was then subsequently pardoned. And you might remember that Bill Clinton got into a huge amount of difficulty over Monica Lewinsky and the lies that he told. He even lied under oath and yet was pardoned. In this case, we're talking about a $130,000 payment, which it is said by the prosecution should have been accounted for as an election expense. But remember, the Hillary Clinton campaign funded illicitly the Steele dossier, which turned out to be entirely untrue about Trump, and they were fined. Barack Obama's campaign misreported funds, received the biggest fine yet seen in American political history. The same happened to Bob Dole, who was a losing Republican presidential candidate. Misspending on his campaign. He received a fine. Can you see where I'm going with this? $130,000 against an election campaign in which $1.6 billion was spent is at most a rounding error. And yet, the very highly politicized judicial system in America has decided to go after Trump. Why they didn't do this back in 2017, 2018 is anybody's guess. Well, you know what it is. They will do anything to stop him running in 2024. They fear, of course, that he might win again. They suffer with Trump derangement syndrome. They literally hate him so much they can't be objective in what they're doing. Now, what we understand will happen at exactly 7:15 UK time. What we understand will happen is he'll be presented with the charges. We understand there'll be up to 30 charges, separate charges, but around this series of payments that were made to the porn actress Stormy Daniels. Trump is expected to plead not guilty to all of them. But think of it like this. This isn't Donald Trump that's on trial. This is due process that's on trial. This is the American Constitution that is on trial. It's America that is on trial. And there are rumours that the judge may even, because these events won't be televised, there are rumours that the judge may even put a gagging order on Trump, or a partial gagging order on Trump, which would mean that after the hearing, when he's free to go, and he's due to fly back down to Palm Beach and give a speech at 1:15 a.m. UK time at Mar-a-Lago, if a gagging order was put on him, he wouldn't be allowed to speak about the prosecution. He wouldn't be allowed publicly to speak about the charges. And if he did, he would then be in contempt of court and could be pretty much immediately arrested. I cannot believe they'd be as stupid as to put a gagging order on him, because my big fear is this. If you lose faith in your judicial system, if you lose faith in your democratic system, then people get pushed to using means that are outside the norms of peaceful democratic conduct. And that is actually how serious I believe this whole thing is. I worry that if tens of millions of Americans lose faith in the whole process, I worry what the outcome could be for America, for the Western world, and for all of us. Well, let's go live to Manhattan and let's join GB News' political editor, Darren McCaffrey, who is there. Darren, from what I could see on the footage, the motorcade that left Trump Tower has peacefully and without incident arrived at the courthouse.
Yeah, indeed. Good afternoon, Nigel, live from, as you say, New York. Donald Trump left, about 45 minutes ago. Trump Tower just behind me, made the relatively short journey, just 4 miles down to Lower Manhattan to Manhattan's criminal court. He is now officially under arrest. As you say, an historic moment. We've never seen this in the entire history of the United States before. What is happening right now is that essentially he's having his fingerprints taken. He's going through the process, if you like, before appearing in courtroom 15 at Manhattan Criminal Court. Now, there are no cameras inside that court. In fact, there are no phones allowed inside that court. That is partly the judgment of the judge in this case, and indeed of the Trump camp, who did not want any of this to be filmed. There are some cameras outside the courtroom, though, and it is possible Donald Trump may well say something as he goes in to that courtroom. But then he will be read, as you say, the charge sheet against him. US media have reported it could be up to 30 separate charges. We don't know the detail of that, and we will find that out in the next 15 minutes or so. And as you said, he is going to plead then